Okay, my hummingbird loving friends, this video's for you. Okay, so it is mid-April in 2022, and it is my favorite time of year because the migration of the hummingbirds is well underway, and there are reports of hummingbirds already being up here in New England. And so it's now time to get their attention and try to draw them into your backyard. Now, we've been doing this for over 20-something years, but it's only been the last handful of years that I actually started getting hooked on trying to attract hummingbirds. They're such an amazing little bird. There's just so much. Just the simple fact that a little tiny bird this big is going to fly all the way to Mexico and Central America in the wintertime and then migrate back up here. But more amazingly, they can memorize exactly where every food source was from previous years. And there's routinely reports of people saying that the same hummingbird comes back, hangs outside their sliding glass window if they're early and they haven't gotten their feeders out yet. So they're just amazing little creatures, and I want to help you try to figure out how to get them into your backyard. Now, the first thing with hummingbirds is that there's lots of tricks, and I always heard red flowers, and there's lots of hummingbird attracting flowers and plants out there, and you can read the magazines and lots of books and Google, whatever. There's lots of information out there, hummingbird plants. But for me, I've been on this mission for the last few years of trying to grow each one, because just because a hummingbird will occasionally go to it doesn't mean that it's a big attractant. And so that's what I've been trying to get to the bottom of. Now, I have to say, Vermilion Air was always a classic one. It looks like a little cigar plant. That one actually worked pretty well. There's petunias and there's lots of flowers, and there's tremendous amounts of native flowering perennials are always the best for those early season crops because that's what they're used to going to anyway. But the downfall is, as much as I believe in natives, I'm not always a big fan of perennials or native perennials for the simple fact that they typically have shorter flowering periods, maybe a little bit more diseases, and don't always look that great consistently all season long. So I'm a flower guy and I love annuals, and I want to show you the #1 flowering plant I have ever found. Now this is Rockin Fuchsia from Proven Winners. Fuchsia in general have been known to do a great job at attracting hummingbirds, but what I love about this plant is it's just so well branched naturally. It's very robust all season long. This is what you get. It just keeps putting out these dark green leaves, but more importantly, these little fuchsia colored trumpet like flowers. Not necessarily red, but it doesn't really matter. If I put one plant out, it's gonna go to these. And so routinely, this is what I'll do is I wait until mid-April, and then even though we may be still getting some frost and still having some issues, I put this plant outside on my porch. And routinely the last 2 years, day one of me putting it out on my porch in mid-April, I had hummingbirds coming to it. And so, now granted, they could be the same hummingbirds coming back every year that have just learned that mine are there. But I had a really hard time getting hummingbirds to hit my feeders, but they always hit this plant. In my experience, getting hummingbirds to come to your property is kind of like survival of fittest and safety in numbers. And so if you have no flowers in your backyard and you have no perennials or anything going on, and you just put a little hummingbird feeder out there, you're gonna have a really hard time getting their attention. But at the same time, red colors clearly is a consistent factor, and then that one's fuchsia, but at the same time, getting more of those colors in your backyard in general may get their attention. But if the plants are not producing enough nectar, or nectar that they find attractive, they're not going to stick around and feed. So in my opinion, whenever I'm trying to get started with hummingbirds, I try to get as many flowers that I know they like in the landscape, give them a selection, also get the feeders out. But that Rockin Fuchsia is just amazing. It's part of a series. We're going to be experimenting. I did the blues, and the hummingbirds would go to the blue suede shoes, but at the same time, they didn't really like it as much, in my experience, as those fuchsia. But again, always experimenting, giving them different things to feed. They have to eat constantly throughout the day. And so having a succession of flowers, and then last year, finally, we got them to hit our feeder. And but they still would go to the Rockin Fuchsia. Okay, so that's it. There's lots of plants that like it. If you want to try that one thing, we do a small series of these Rockin Fuchsia in gallons right now, just to help people jumpstart the season. But then we'll have hundreds of them in little 4-inch plants to get things going. But right now, get your feeders out. It's time. The males come in first and they're scouting. The females will be lagging behind. So the massive hummingbirds don't seem to be here yet, but they are in our backyard according to the migration map. So get your feeders filled, start getting some flowers in the landscape, and enjoy those little birds. Take care.